Greetings, Training for Translators listeners. This is Corinne McKay welcoming you to episode 18 of the Training for Translators podcast, in which we're going to talk about before you decide to quit freelancing, here are some strategies to try. But before that, if you're not on the Training for Translators mailing list and you're listening to this podcast, you really should be. If you head over to trainingfortranslators.com and right on the homepage or in the sidebar of any of my blog posts, you'll see a little sign up box where you can sign up for my mailing list and receive the Training for Translators newsletter every Tuesday. And for those of you who are interpreters, you should also check out my new book, Getting Started as a Freelance Interpreter. It's out now from Tilt Publishing, and I'm really excited about the positive reviews that it has gotten. So it's pretty short, 167 pages, and contains the advice on the basics of launching and running a freelance spoken language interpreting business. So, on to this week's topic. In last month's podcast episode, I talked about a LinkedIn post that I had written on the large number of freelancers out there who have had freelance businesses that really thrived for years or even decades, working for a small number of translation agencies and calling it their freelance business. Now, to clarify, there's absolutely no shame in this. 2 agencies and an email address was also a pretty good description of my business too. I think from about 2005 until probably past 2010, I had one agency client that made up more than 50% of my income. So when I say 2 agencies and an email address, I'm not at all shaming you. I'm just saying, that you are not in some fundamental way really running a business if you're doing that. But here's what I found more surprising in the responses to that article was the number of freelancers who either said or sort of implied, I really don't have a desire to run a real business. I don't want to market. I don't want to network. I don't want to be more visible. I just want to translate, not be a translation salesperson or a project manager. And a number of people who commented, I don't know that that path is viable anymore. So I'm thinking about looking for another career. Now, most importantly, if you really feel in your heart that you want to move on from the translation profession, and here I should say, as I always do, that we're, I think, really more talking about translators than about interpreters. I think a lot of things have changed about the interpreting profession, most notably the switch to remote interpreting, which has had huge pluses for a lot of interpreters like myself. I really probably would not have a job if it wouldn't have as satisfying and lucrative of an interpreting job as I have now, because there really is very, very little French conference interpreting where I live. Almost all of my conference work is remote. So I think that although we have seen huge shifts in the interpreting landscape in the past, let's say since the start of COVID, machine interpreting is really not there yet to actually replace interpreting of unscripted live events. That doesn't mean that someday it won't be. I think actually, someday, fairly, far into the future, I think after the working lifetimes of most of us who are active in the interpreting profession today, although I may be wrong about that, I think that far into the future, machine interpreting may replace humans, but it really is not there yet. So we're mostly talking here about translators. So if you really feel that you want to move on and do something else, whether that is another knowledge profession or whether that is, selling real estate or walking dogs, you don't need my approval to do that. But I do think that I am a big fan of evolving. And given the choice in my own freelance business between stagnation and making a major change, I would almost always pick the major change than stagnation. I think that if you are considering quitting freelancing because you think one of these 3 things, I'd ask you to reconsider. If you think that quote unquote pure translation work no longer exists, if you think that really running a business isn't for you, Or if you think that there is no pathway forward for you as a translator, I would encourage you to reconsider and try these suggestions. So here's my take. I really think that although the language professions are changing and in many cases changing really fast, unless, let's say, Esperanto really takes off in a way that Esperanto historically has not, the truth is that the world is always going to need multilingual communicators in some fashion. I think that the demand for our language services is not going anywhere. And as I said before, I think at the same time, the landscape of what the realities of the job look like is really changing. And in some cases, for example, if you translate for agencies, it's changing really fast and it's changing in ways that you may not agree with. So I was just reminiscing the other day with another translator about, I can say the name now because they don't exist anymore, that in the early 2000s, my dominant client was a legal translation company in New York called Geotext Translations, which was subsequently bought by Lionbridge and fundamentally doesn't exist anymore. That's the only reason I would say the name. And they had these just lovely project managers who were mostly really smart, nice people in their early 20s, and they would call you on the phone to ask if you were available. So not only were they not sending out, sort of come and get it emails, they would call you and say like, "How was your weekend?" Any chance that you have room for, 8,000 words in your schedule this week? They knew all about my family. I would meet them at the ATA conference. They would ask me for pictures of my vacations. And I think I really miss those times. And it is really tough to see changes that you don't necessarily think are positive. But I really think that the big shift is not so much AI. It's that this, two agencies and an email address business model where you called yourself a freelancer, but you were really more of a fractional employee. It's that model is pretty much over. That's what I hear from a lot of freelancers these days, of people saying that they don't really know how to market because they have never had to market, that they've earned, 70% of their income from 2 to 4 agencies and then filled in the other 30% with kind of one-off requests. So, it's a lot to absorb, it's a lot to deal with, and I think that there are certainly ways forward. If you are in this boat that you're wondering like, is freelancing still for me? Here are some things that I would recommend. So let's say right now, I think a common situation is that you have some regular agency clients, but the work is not like great. Maybe they are offering you machine translation post editing at a low hourly rate, or maybe they're sending you really small minimum charge jobs. So, one phenomenon I think we've seen a lot, talk to a couple of project managers who see, under the hood of these huge management systems that they'll say they work for a big agency and they see under the hood of these huge management systems that big agencies use and say, we've seen the average size of a translation job just keep dropping and dropping and dropping because the only thing that is being sent out to translators for a sort without a sort of first draft machine translation is stuff that the MT system can't read. So let's say that this is most of what they're sending you. I think there are 3 things that I would do. Number 1, I would just keep doing the agency work that you have, even if it's not great, and let that keep you afloat while you're looking for something better. And yes, this is me saying this, who is always telling people, like, working is not always better than not working, et cetera, et cetera. But in that case, I really think that unless you have a really good chunk of savings or you have a spouse or partner's income that you can depend on, you can't afford to sort of quit without a net. But then here's what I would do. Right this second, I would market to agencies. Again, yes, you heard that correctly. Me, the person who is always telling people to market to direct clients, I would market to agencies and at least start trying to find some better agency work. So lately, I have become a huge fan of the Ed Gandia expression, KTLO client, keep the lights on client. That means a client that you don't hate the work. The work isn't unpleasant. They don't treat you horribly, but it's work that simply pays your bills, right? There is nothing particularly enjoyable or not enjoyable. There's nothing that is dramatically pleasant or unpleasant about this work. It pays your bills. I would look for better work of that type. And why? Because I think that, first of all, marketing to direct clients is a much longer game than marketing to agencies. And I think it leads a lot of people into analysis paralysis. So I think people who think, well, now I'm going to just transform my whole business into working for direct clients tend to think, okay, but first I have to make a website or update my website. Then I have to pick some more targeted specializations because otherwise, in the direct client market, I don't know who to market to. Then I have to decide who needs me. Then I have to figure out who to contact within those organizations. And by then, you're basically like having a panic attack. I would be too. By the time you get through all of that, you've likely thought, you know what, maybe like doing a different job doesn't sound that bad after all. So here's what I would do is just try to diversify a little bit so that you are not so dependent on those same 2 to 4 agency clients. You could, for example, do this. Set a goal of applying to 50 agencies in the next month and just start cranking out the applications. And I think I have said many times that I made lots and lots and lots of mistakes in my first couple of years as a freelancer, but I did a few things well. And one of the things that I think I did well is that every second that I did not have paying work, I was marketing. Like the advantage that you have when you don't have a lot of work is that you have a lot of time, which I will tell you now, as someone who has kind of been like working too much for the past month. I just finished a big project today. And so, I'm going to get more sleep tonight. But the disadvantage of having a lot of work is that you are, trading time for money, right? You're making a lot of money. I'm on track to have my best year ever as a freelancer, but the past month I've been working really a lot. Let's say that you set a goal of applying to 50 agencies in the next month. Just start cranking out the applications. And one mantra I think you want to keep here is James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. I'm a huge fan of his. And if you don't subscribe to his 321 newsletter, go to jamesclear.com and subscribe to that. It literally takes 5 minutes to read. It comes out every Thursday. I love it. And one of the things that he says all the time is action relieves anxiety. Working on a problem reduces your fear of it. And I think that that is really true for us as freelancers. Maybe these agencies that you are going to market to don't have better work or don't have different work than what you're doing now. But on the other hand, maybe they do. But the point is to at least make you less dependent on the handful of agencies that you are working with and to just sort of like get the marketing flowing. Then here's what I would do next. Think of the least intimidating way to start marketing to direct clients. One entry point that I think can be a little bit less intimidating if you are new to the direct client market is agencies that aren't translation agencies. Every industry on earth has agencies, right? Because agencies serve a purpose for companies or end clients that don't want to deal with other end clients themselves or service providers that don't want to deal with end clients. Every industry has agencies. So, for example, if you do official document translations, you could work with credentials evaluation agencies. Those are agencies that help people who work in a credentialed profession. Like, say, I just did some translations for a Belgian veterinarian who is moving to the US and trying to take the US veterinary board exams. And they are going through a credentials evaluation agency who referred them to me. So you could work for content marketing agencies, all different kinds of agencies. Why is this easier? Number one, because they definitely need you. And number two, because just like translation agencies, if they like you, they may pair you up with multiple end clients. So here you are not convincing them to try translation in order to improve their business. You're doing something like, let's say you're an English to Spanish translator and you're going to send a really simple email. I came across your website while researching international marketing agencies in Madrid. I can imagine that there might be a need for a English to Spanish translator with marketing expertise. And you're sending those to international marketing agencies in Spanish speaking countries. Or let's say you're a court interpreter and you're going to send your CV resume out to legal services agencies, the people who hire court reporters and things like that. I would start there and give yourself the goal of finding one new direct client by the end of the year and start only with those sort of entry level direct clients who definitely need translation or interpreting. Only then are you going to think about scaling up to larger businesses. And I'm guessing by then you might feel a lot more positive about what's going on in your business. So, for all of the negativity about the future of the language professions, I've been hearing from a good number of freelancers who are trying new things and it's going really well for them. And I think that could happen to you for you too if you follow some of these tips. So let me know how it goes. You can go to trainingfortranslators.com and leave a comment on any of the blog posts that contain these podcast episodes, or send me an email at classes@trainingfortranslators.com. Thanks so much for listening. This has been episode 18 of the Training for Translators podcast. The podcast is hosted by me, Corinne McKay. I use a Shure MV7 Plus microphone to record it in Audacity, and it is technologically hosted on Libsyn. Thanks, and I'll talk to you in a future episode.